and the call may be monitored for quality assurance purposes.
What is this survey for?
It's concerning the upcoming elections and the rail system. Okay, thank you. And I'd like to ask you about the primary election for City Council. If the election were held today and the candidates were Alex Santiago, Kim Marcos Pine, Mel Cahelli, and Tom Berg, for whom would you vote? Okay, moving along. As you may know, a few years ago, voters approved the Honolulu Rail Transit project connecting East Kapolei with Ala Moana Center in Honolulu. And do you currently support or oppose this project? And here are two statements that have been made about rail by two different candidates running for City Council, and please tell me which statement you agree with more. The first statement says, "This candidate commutes every day in traffic and knows it will only get worse unless we do rail and do it right. This candidate will make sure we hold all responsible parties accountable for the cost and time the project takes, so we can build it quickly to create jobs and reduce traffic pollution and our dependence on foreign oil." And the second statement says, "This candidate says there should be another vote on rail project and thinks it is wrong to just plow ahead when roughly half of the citizenry objects to the rail project. This candidate wants a traffic solution that a vast majority of us can agree on and feels that has never been adequately put before the voters." And would you agree more with statement 1 or statement 2? And now I'd like to read you some statements that supporters have made about the candidates running for City Council, and after you hear each one, please tell me how convincing each statement is as a reason to vote for that candidate. And the first one is Alex Santiago is a former state representative and Hawaii Democratic Party chairman. As the executive director of a health and human services nonprofit organization, he has helped the most underserved residents of Oahu. As a member of the City Council, Santiago will work to balance the budget, make rail transportation a reality, and promote sustainable economic growth so we can create jobs and protect our island. And do you find that to be a very convincing, somewhat convincing, a little convincing, or not at all convincing reason to support Alex Santiago? Kim Marcos Pine is the granddaughter of Filipino immigrants who was elected to the State House in 2004 as the first Republican to represent this area. After watching Eva Beach get neglected by her elected officials, she ran for office, and in just 5 years, she helped to deliver a record $700 million to Eva Beach for new roads, to fix schools, and to improve public safety. And is that a very, somewhat, a little, or not at all convincing reason to support Kim Marcos Pine? And Mel Cahelli is former president of the local Hawaiian Teamsters Union, and who has been a leader in the fight for workers' rights. As a city councilman, he will make sure workers and their families get a fair deal. And is that a very, somewhat, a little, or not at all convincing reason to support Mel Cahelli? Okay, and Tom Berg is a Honolulu city councilman, a Republican and former staff member in the state legislature who has served West Oahu residents for over a decade. He supports private property rights, lower taxes, and fiscal responsibility. As a city councilman, Berg has been a leading opponent of the rail project and will continue to make sure taxpayer dollars are not wasted. And is that a very convincing, somewhat, little, or not at all convincing reason to support Tom Berg? Thank you. Moving along, now that you've heard more information, I'd like to ask you again about the primary election for a city council. If the election for Honolulu City Council were held today and the candidates were Alex Santiago, Kim Marcos Pine, Mel Cahelli, and Tom Berg, for whom would you vote? Thank you. And now I'd like to read you some statements made by opponents of Tom Berg. For each statement, please tell me whether it raises very serious doubts, minor doubts, or no real doubts in your mind about Tom Berg. The first one says, when President Obama was in Hawaii attending a major international conference, Berg got so drunk at the conference that he yelled at Secret Service agents and the police were called and removed him. The police report indicated Berg tried to enter a secure zone without proper credentials and was, quote, extremely argumentative and irrational. And does that raise very serious doubts, minor doubts, or no real doubts in your own mind about Tom Berg? Okay, moving along. Berg has spent thousands of taxpayer dollars for campaign activities and forced his staff to campaign for him while on city time, which is against the law. And does that raise very serious, minor, or no real doubts in your mind about Tom Berg?
Are these all facts? I mean,
I'm not sure. They're presented as occurrences.
So who's paying for this survey?
We don't have that information. I can check one thing with my supervisor real quick if you want.
Okay.
All right, 1 sec. Yes, I just verified it, and they don't even give the supervisors that information. It's used to keep the survey from being biased. But there's questions about that opponents make to the rest of the candidates as well. Okay, Okay, it says Berg has spent thousands of taxpayer dollars for campaign activities and forced his staff to campaign for him while on city time, which is against the law. And does that raise very serious, minor, or no real doubts in your own mind about Tom Berg? Thank you. And some people have described Berg as ill-tempered and inflammatory. He recently yelled at the council chair when he didn't get his way, and has been known to interrupt people, which is an example of why the city council can't get anything done. Does that raise very serious, minor, or no real doubts in your mind about Tom Berg?
Who's paying for this?
Berg proposed raising the sales tax by hundreds of millions of dollars, hitting working families and small businesses the hardest at a time when the economy continues to struggle and gas prices are rising. Does that raise very serious, minor, or no real doubts in your mind about Tom Berg? And regardless of who you may be supporting for city council, which of the statements you just heard gave you the most concern about Tom Berg for city council?
Who's paying for this survey?
Unfortunately, I don't have that information. The next statements are from opponents for the rest of the candidates too, though.
Okay.
Okay, it says now I'd like to read you some statements made by opponents of some of the other candidates running for city council. And for each statement, please tell me whether it raises very serious doubts, minor doubts, or no real doubts in your own mind about that candidate. The first one says, Alex Santiago is a former legislator from the North Shore and has only lived in this district for a short time. He does not understand the local issues facing our community. And does that raise very serious doubts, minor doubts, or no real doubts in your own mind about Alex Santiago? Moving along, Kim Pine is currently under investigation by the FBI for asking Tom Berg to hire friends and family members of hers in return for the endorsement she gave him that helped him win the city council seat in a special election in 2010. And does that raise very serious doubts, minor doubts, or no real doubts in your mind about Kim Pine? Finally, Mel Cahelli is in the pocket of labor unions. He is a former union boss who will put public employees and their pay and pensions over our interests. And does that raise very serious, minor, or no real doubts in your mind about Mel Cahelli? And now that you've heard more information, I'd like to ask you one last time about the primary election for City Council. The election for Honolulu City Council were held today, and the candidates were Alex Santiago, Kim Marcos Pine, Mel Cahelli, and Tom Berg. For whom would you vote?
Can I ask you a question? What is this company, your company that you work for?
Hawaii Opinion Research.
I'm sorry, what?
Hawaii Opinion Research.
Hawaii Opinion Research?
Yeah.
Okay, so you don't know who's paying for this service call?
I don't. We get a bunch of different projects during the day.
Oh, okay.
From various sources, and a lot of times we don't know who's paying for the survey. In special cases like this where they don't want it to be biased.
Uh-huh.
And on that one, did you know for whom you would vote?
Okay, so you say you're calling from the Hawaii
Hawaii Opinion Research is the name of